The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched far above the heads of the gathered delegates. Silver walls rose high into darkness, and floating lights moved slowly through the air like lazy stars. On this day, like every day for the past 200 years, representatives from 43 different worlds sat in their assigned seats. Council Speaker Veltar walked to the center platform. His tall, thin body moved with the grace that all Zenthari possessed. His purple skin gleamed under the bright lights, and his forearms gestured as he began to speak. Today would be different, though he did not know it yet. "The council session begins," Veltar announced. His voice echoed through the vast space. "We will discuss the mining rights for the Kepler system, trade disputes between the Velkari and Thraxian merchants, and the proposed expansion of shipping lanes through Sector 7. As the delegates settled into their seats, Veltar noticed something strange. The human section was empty. All 12 seats that belonged to the Terran Federation sat vacant. No Li Wujin, the human ambassador who always asked too many questions. No Park So-young, the trade commissioner who constantly worried about fair treatment of smaller worlds. No other human representatives who usually filled those seats with their endless note-taking and careful observations. At first, Veltar thought perhaps they were late. Humans were always punctual, sometimes arriving early to review documents before meetings began. But as minutes passed, the empty seats remained empty. HFY, the Thraxian mining director, noticed too. His rocky, boulder-like body shifted in his reinforced chair. "Where are the humans today?" he asked his aide in a low, rumbling voice. The aide, a smaller Thraxian with bright orange crystals growing from his shoulders, checked his datapad. "Sir, we received a formal notice yesterday. The humans have withdrawn from all council proceedings." "Withdrawn?" HFY's voice carried surprise. "What do you mean withdrawn?" "They sent a single message, sir. It said, 'The Terran Federation hereby withdraws from all Galactic Council proceedings, effective immediately.' Nothing else." Across the hall, Commander Krell of the Velkari military heard this news with great interest. His wolf-like ears twitched, and his sharp teeth showed in what might have been a smile. The Velkari had always found humans troublesome. They asked questions about military actions. They demanded explanations for conquered territories. They insisted on what they called peaceful solutions to conflicts. No explanation? Krell asked his own aide. "No demands? No threats?" "None, Commander. Just the withdrawal notice." Veltar called for order as whispers spread through the hall. The news was traveling fast. Humans were gone. After 2 centuries of participation, they had simply left. "We have received notice," Veltar announced formally, "that the Terran Federation has chosen to withdraw from council proceedings. We will continue with today's agenda." A cheer went up from the Thraxian section. HFY stood up, his massive form casting shadows on nearby delegates. "Finally," he declared. "No more human interference in honest mining operations. No more delays for their so-called environmental studies." The Velkari delegates joined the celebration. Commander Krell's aide whispered loudly enough for others to hear. "No more humans telling us how to conduct military operations. No more demands for prisoner exchanges or ceasefire negotiations." Even some of the smaller species seemed pleased. The Rigelians had always felt that humans paid too much attention to their industrial practices. The Altarians thought human trade regulations were too strict. The Danebian collective believed human agricultural advisors asked too many questions about their farming methods. "This is a new day for the galaxy," declared Trade Minister Vexlon of the Thraxian Commercial Guild. "We can finally conduct business without human red tape. No more forms to fill out. No more environmental impact studies. No more workers' rights reviews." Veltar found himself agreeing. He remembered countless sessions where Li Wujin had stood up to question mining proposals. The human ambassador would always ask, "Have you considered the long-term effects on the planet's ecosystem? Or what provisions have been made for the indigenous population?" Such questions slowed down progress and complicated simple decisions. Park So-young had been equally troublesome in trade matters. She constantly worried about smaller worlds getting fair prices for their resources. She insisted on detailed contracts that protected workers and prevented exploitation. She asked for regular inspections of facilities and detailed reports on working conditions. "The humans always made everything complicated," muttered Ambassador Thelmos of the Zenthari Diplomatic Corps. They wanted documentation for everything. They demanded transparency in all dealings. They insisted on these endless committees to study every proposal. The celebration continued as delegates discussed the new opportunities that would open up. The Kepler system mining rights, which had been delayed for 3 years due to human environmental concerns, could now be approved immediately. The disputed territory between the Velkari and Xanthari could be resolved through traditional means without human mediators insisting on peaceful negotiation. Commander Krell was particularly pleased about this last point. The Velkari way of settling disputes was much simpler than the complex diplomatic processes humans always suggested. Take what you want, defend what you have, and let strength determine outcomes. Much more efficient than endless talking. As the day's session progressed, the delegates found themselves working faster than they had in years. Without human representatives asking for clarification, requesting environmental studies, or insisting on workers' rights protections, decisions came quickly and easily. The Thraxian mining proposal for the Kepler system passed without debate. The new shipping lanes through Sector 7 were approved without the usual safety studies humans always demanded. Trade agreements that had been stalled for months moved forward rapidly without human insistence on fair labor practices and sustainable resource extraction. By the end of the session, Feltar felt a sense of accomplishment he had not experienced in decades. So much had been achieved in a single day. The bureaucratic obstacles that humans had always placed in the way of progress were finally gone. Perhaps, he announced to the assembly, we should have encouraged human withdrawal years ago. Today has shown us how much more efficient our proceedings can be without their constant interference. The delegates agreed with enthusiastic approval. As they filed out of the Great Hall, conversations buzzed with excitement about the new era beginning for galactic civilization. No more human regulations, no more human oversight, no more human questions about ethics, environmental protection, or fair treatment. The galaxy was free to conduct business as it saw fit. What could possibly go wrong? In the empty human section, 12 chairs sat silent and abandoned. On each seat, a small data pad remained, containing detailed reports about infrastructure maintenance schedules, early warning systems for cosmic threats, and carefully researched predictions about potential problems in various sectors. None of the celebrating delegates noticed these forgotten devices. They were too busy planning their newly unrestrained future to pay attention to human paperwork. The Great Hall grew dark as the last delegates departed, their voices echoing with plans for expansion, conquest, and profit. In the silence that followed, the empty human chairs seemed to wait patiently for occupants who would never return. 3 months had passed since the humans left, and Trade Minister Vexilon of the Thraxian Commercial Guild was having the best quarter of his career. The new mining operations in the Kepler system were producing record amounts of rare crystals. Without human environmental restrictions, his crews could work around the clock, extracting materials from previously forbidden areas. His celebration ended abruptly when his communication device buzzed with an urgent message. "Sir," came the voice of mining supervisor Grakfin. "We have a problem at the Kepler extraction site." "What kind of problem?" Vexilon asked, though he was barely listening. He was reviewing profit reports that showed earnings up 40% since human departure. "The gravity wells, sir. They're acting strange. 3 of our heavy mining ships have been pulled off course. We lost contact with mining platform 7 this morning." Vexilon set down his profit reports. "Pulled off course by what?" "Unknown gravitational anomalies, sir. They weren't there yesterday. It's like space itself is bending in ways our sensors can't predict." This was troubling news. Vexilon had heard similar reports from other mining operations. Strange gravitational effects appearing without warning, solar radiation spikes that damaged equipment, asteroid fields shifting in unexpected patterns. "Have our scientists figured out what's causing this?" Vexilon asked. "That's the problem, sir. We don't have scientists who understand these phenomena. The humans used to handle all the environmental analysis for these systems." Vexilon felt a cold sensation in his stomach. He remembered Kim Tae-wan, the human infrastructure engineer who had always insisted on detailed gravitational surveys before approving mining operations. Vexilon had thought the human was being overly cautious, wasting time with unnecessary studies. Now he wondered if Kim Tae-wan had known something important. Meanwhile, in the shipping lanes between the Xanthari homeworld and the Regelian trade posts, Captain Nix Ibarra was discovering that space travel was becoming more dangerous than it had been in decades. Navigation beacons that had worked perfectly for years were failing one by one. The automated guidance systems that helped ships navigate through asteroid fields were giving incorrect readings. "Captain," reported Navigation Officer Telrim, "we've lost contact with Beacon Station 12. That's the fourth one this week. Are the Rigelians maintaining their equipment properly?" Nixbara asked. "The Rigelians say it's not their responsibility, sir. They say the humans used to maintain the beacon network." Nixabara paused in his review of shipping schedules. "The humans maintained the navigation beacons?" "Apparently so, sir. Along with the gravitational sensors, solar storm warning systems, and asteroid tracking networks." This was news to Nixbara. He had always assumed the navigation systems were maintained by whoever owned the local space. He had never paid attention to the technical details. Ships went where they needed to go and the systems worked. That was all he had needed to know. But now ships were getting lost. Cargo vessels were arriving days late because they had to navigate manually around asteroid fields. Some ships were not arriving at all. The worst problems were developing in the diplomatic sphere. Ambassador Thelmos found himself dealing with increasingly hostile communications between the Velkari and Zenthari governments. Without human mediators like Park So-young, old grievances were surfacing again. The latest crisis involved a trade dispute over mineral rights in the Vega system. 3 months ago, such disagreements had been resolved through the Human Trade Mediation Service. Park So-young and her team would review the competing claims, examine historical agreements, and propose fair solutions that both sides could accept. Now there was no mediation service. The Velkari claimed the mineral rights belonged to them by right of conquest. The Zenthari insisted they had purchased the rights legally from the previous inhabitants. Both sides were assembling military fleets to enforce their positions. "Can't we find human mediators to resolve this?" Ambassador Thelmos asked his aide during an emergency session. "We've tried contacting the human embassy, sir, but they closed all diplomatic facilities when they withdrew from the council. No human government will respond to our requests for assistance." Commander Krell of the Velkari military was pleased by this development. Without human interference, the Velkari could resolve disputes the traditional way. Military strength would determine ownership. The strongest would take what they wanted, and the weak would accept what they were given. But even Commander Krell was starting to notice problems. His fleet's long-range sensors, which had always provided accurate information about enemy movements, were giving strange readings. Ships appeared on scanners where no ships existed. Real vessels disappeared from detection without explanation. "What's wrong with our sensor array?" Krell demanded of his chief technical officer. "Nothing wrong with our equipment, sir," the officer replied. "The problem is with the sensor relay stations. They're not receiving proper calibration updates." "Who provides calibration updates?" "The humans did, sir. They maintained a galaxy-wide sensor network that provided accurate readings to all council member militaries." Krell's satisfaction at human departure was beginning to fade. Fighting wars was much more difficult when you couldn't trust your sensors to tell you where the enemy was located. The problems were spreading to civilian systems as well. On 17 different worlds, food distribution networks were failing. Cargo ships carrying grain from agricultural worlds were not reaching their destinations on time. Refrigeration systems in storage facilities were breaking down. Preserved food supplies were spoiling due to malfunctions in automated preservation systems. Dr. Nixara, a Zenthari scientist specializing in agricultural systems, was called in to investigate the food shortage crisis. What she discovered troubled her deeply. The Agricultural Coordination Network was entirely human-designed and human-maintained, she reported to the Zenthari leadership. They monitored crop yields, coordinated harvests, and managed food distribution across 43 worlds. "Surely other species can maintain these systems," replied Governor Veltane. "How complicated can it be?" Dr. Nixara displayed a holographic chart showing the interconnected food network. Lines of light connected hundreds of worlds, showing the flow of different crops, the timing of harvests, and the distribution of preserved foods to planets that could not grow their own. "It's extremely complicated, sir. The humans tracked soil conditions, weather patterns, and crop diseases across the entire galaxy. They coordinated planting schedules so that different worlds would harvest at different times, ensuring continuous food supplies. They managed storage facilities, transportation schedules, and emergency reserves. The chart showed red warning lights appearing on dozens of worlds where food supplies were running low. Without this coordination, Dr. Nixara continued, agricultural worlds are overproducing some crops while others experience shortages. Storage systems are failing because no one is monitoring equipment maintenance schedules. Transportation is inefficient because no one is coordinating delivery routes. Governor Veltane stared at the holographic display. How long do we have before these failures become critical? If current trends continue, sir, 14 worlds will experience food shortages within 2 months. 7 worlds may face famine conditions. The cheerful atmosphere that had followed human departure was evaporating quickly. Delegates who had celebrated the end of human interference were now discovering that much of what they had considered interference was actually essential, maintenance of galactic civilization. But the worst discovery was yet to come. In a research facility on the edge of Xanthari space, astronomers detected signs of an approaching solar storm that would affect 12 star systems. Such storms could disrupt communications, damage satellites, and endanger space travel for weeks. The astronomers immediately tried to access the early warning network that would alert affected worlds to the danger. They found that the network had been shut down 3 months earlier. It had been maintained entirely by humans. The storm was 3 days away, and there was no system in place to warn the billions of beings who lived in its path. For the first time since human departure, the galaxy began to understand what they had truly lost. In the abandoned human facilities scattered across dozens of worlds, automated systems continued to function for a while longer, but without human technicians to perform maintenance, repair failures, and update programming. These systems were slowly beginning to fail. The galaxy was discovering that running a civilization was much more complicated than anyone had realized. And the humans who had quietly kept everything working were nowhere to be found. 6 months after the humans disappeared, High Merchant Velron of the Thraxian Commercial Guild stood in what used to be the most profitable mining operation in the galaxy. Now it was a disaster zone. The Kepler system extraction facility floated dead in space, its massive structure twisted and broken by gravitational forces that had appeared without warning. How many ships did we lose? Velron asked his emergency coordinator. 47 mining vessels, sir. 312 crew members. The gravitational anomaly pulled them into the system's star before we could respond. Velron stared at the wreckage through the viewing port of his command ship. The mining operation had been running perfectly for 4 months after human departure. Production was up, profits were soaring, and the Thraxian Commercial Guild was expanding faster than ever before. Then space itself had turned deadly. Sir, the coordinator continued, we found something in the abandoned human research station. A warning report filed by Kim Tae-wan, the human engineer who used to oversee operations in this system. The coordinator handed Velron a datapad. The report was dated 2 years earlier. Velron read Kim Tae-wan's careful analysis of gravitational patterns in the Kepler system. The human had identified a dangerous resonance pattern that would develop if mining operations extracted materials from specific asteroids. Kim Tae-wan had predicted exactly what would happen. The gravitational collapse, the formation of deadly space-time distortions, the destruction of anything caught in the affected area. His report recommended avoiding certain mining sites and maintaining careful monitoring of gravitational readings. The Thraxian Mining Authority had ignored the report completely. This, human knew what would happen, Velron said quietly. He tried to warn us. Yes, sir. We found similar reports from human engineers throughout the galaxy. Warnings about solar radiation patterns, asteroid collision risks, and unstable wormhole formations, all ignored by local authorities. Velron felt sick. The Thraxians had lost their most profitable operation and hundreds of lives because they had dismissed human warnings as unnecessary interference. How many other systems were heading toward similar disasters? The answer was becoming clear across the galaxy. Dr. Nixara received daily reports of failing systems from her research station on Xanthari Prime. Each day brought news of new catastrophes that could have been prevented. The Rigelian agricultural world of New Terra was experiencing crop failures on a massive scale. Without Beijunseo's monitoring network, farmers had not received warnings about soil contamination spreading from old industrial sites. Millions of tons of food crops were poisoned and had to be destroyed. The Altarian shipping lanes were in chaos. Navigation systems designed by humans were failing throughout their space. Cargo ships were colliding with asteroids that the automated tracking systems could no longer monitor properly. Some vessels were simply vanishing, lost in regions of space that humans had marked as dangerous but never explained why. The Denebian Collective was facing the worst crisis of all. Their industrial world of Vega 7 was experiencing complete atmospheric processor failure. The massive machines that kept the planet's air breathable were shutting down one by one. Without human maintenance crews, no one knew how to repair the incredibly complex systems. "How long before the atmosphere becomes toxic?" asked Collective Leader Prime Nexvel during an emergency session. "6 weeks, sir," replied Chief Engineer Goxram. "Maybe less. We've tried to contact the human engineer who designed these systems, but she disappeared with all the other humans." Nexval reviewed the files on the atmospheric processors. They had been designed by Yoon Hae-rin, a human specialist in large-scale environmental systems. Her documentation was incredibly detailed, but written in human technical language that no other species had bothered to learn. "Can't we figure out how these machines work?" Nexval asked. "We're trying, sir, but the systems are enormously complex. They interact with each other in ways we don't understand. Every time we try to fix one component, 3 others start failing." The atmospheric processors had been working perfectly for decades under human maintenance. The Denebian Collective had never questioned how the systems operated, as long as they continued functioning. Now they were discovering that maintaining planetary life support required knowledge and expertise they simply did not possess. Similar crises were developing throughout the galaxy. The early warning systems for cosmic threats had completely failed. Solar storms were striking worlds without notice, damaging communications and power systems. Asteroid impacts that human monitoring stations would have detected months in advance were hitting inhabited planets with devastating results. The most frightening discovery came from the military sector. Commander Krell was reviewing intelligence reports when he realized that the galaxy's entire sensor network had been dependent on human coordination. Without human technicians maintaining sensor relay stations, military forces could no longer track enemy movements accurately. "Sir," reported Intelligence Officer Vectar, "we've lost contact with 70% of our deep space monitoring stations. The automated systems are failing without human oversight." "What about the other species? Are their sensor networks operational?" "No, sir. It appears that all military sensor networks were integrated into a single system, maintained by human technical specialists. We never realized because the system works so well." Commander Krell understood the implications immediately. Without reliable sensors, military planning became impossible. Wars could not be fought effectively when you could not locate enemy forces. Defense systems could not protect planets when they could not detect incoming threats. The Velkari military, which had been so pleased to be free of human restrictions on warfare, was discovering that humans had also provided the technological foundation that made warfare possible. But the most critical failure was in the area that humans had worked hardest to maintain: peace itself. Ambassador Thelmos watched in horror as conflicts erupted throughout the galaxy. The carefully balanced diplomatic relationships that human mediators had maintained for decades were collapsing. The Velkari and Zenthari were now openly at war over the Vega system mineral rights. Without human mediators, there was no mechanism for resolving the dispute peacefully. Both sides were assembling massive fleets, preparing for a conflict that could devastate entire star systems. Smaller species were choosing sides or declaring neutrality. But without human diplomatic frameworks, there was no way to coordinate responses or prevent the conflict from spreading. The delicate web of treaties, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts that had maintained galactic peace was unraveling without human oversight. How did we not realize how much the humans were doing? Thelmos asked his aide during a crisis meeting. "I think we assumed it was all automatic, sir. The systems worked so smoothly that we never questioned who was maintaining them." Dr. Nixara was reaching the same conclusion in her research. She had spent months analyzing the failures occurring throughout the galaxy, and a clear pattern was emerging. Every critical system that was failing had been quietly maintained by human specialists. Every disaster that was occurring had been predicted and prevented by human monitoring networks. The humans had not been controlling galactic civilization. They had been maintaining it. Like skilled engineers maintaining a complex machine, they had kept all the interconnected systems running smoothly, while everyone else focused on using the benefits those systems provided. They weren't trying to interfere with our activities, Dr. Nixara explained to a gathering of Xanthari leaders. They were trying to keep us from destroying ourselves. She displayed a holographic map of the galaxy, showing all the systems that were currently failing. Red warning lights covered nearly every inhabited system. Critical infrastructure was breaking down everywhere. Every environmental regulation they proposed was designed to prevent exactly the disasters we're experiencing now. Every safety requirement they insisted on was protecting us from dangers we didn't understand. Every maintenance schedule they established was keeping essential systems operational. The leaders stared at the display in silence. The scope of the crisis was overwhelming. Without human expertise, galactic civilization was collapsing. "Can we fix these problems ourselves?" asked Governor Veltane. "Some of them, sir. But it will take decades to develop the knowledge and expertise that humans provided, and we may not have decades. Some of these failures are approaching critical levels." The worst realization was yet to come. In the abandoned human embassy on Xanthari Prime, Dr. Nixara discovered an archive of reports that human specialists had filed over the past 50 years. Thousands of documents predicting exactly the problems that were now occurring. Li Wujin had filed reports warning about the consequences of removing environmental protections from mining operations. Park So-young had predicted the diplomatic crises that would develop without mediation services. Kim Tae-wan had identified the infrastructure failures that would cascade through the galaxy. Every disaster was documented. Every warning had been ignored. The humans had tried for decades to explain the importance of their work, but other species had dismissed their concerns as unnecessary interference. 1 year after the humans disappeared, Council Speaker Veltar stood before the emergency assembly of the Galactic Council. The great hall that had once hosted celebrations of human departure now echoed with desperate voices and frightened delegates. The silver walls seemed darker, and the floating lights flickered as power systems throughout the galaxy struggled to maintain basic operations. "The situation is critical," Veltar announced to the assembled representatives. His purple skin had lost its healthy gleam and his forearms trembled slightly as he spoke. 17 worlds have suffered catastrophic system failures. Trade routes are collapsing. Military conflicts are spreading throughout 3 sectors. The statistics were devastating. The Danubian Collective had been forced to evacuate Vega 7 when the atmospheric processors finally failed completely. 2 million beings were now refugees, crowded into temporary shelters on worlds that could barely support their own populations. The Thraxian Commercial Guild had lost 60% of their mining operations to gravitational anomalies, solar radiation, and equipment failures. Their economy was in complete collapse. High Merchant Velron, who had once celebrated the end of human environmental restrictions, now sat with his head in his hands as he listened to reports of continued disasters. Commander Krell of the Velkari military reported that the war with the Xanthari had expanded to involve 12 different species. Without sensor networks to coordinate military actions, battles were chaotic and destructive. Entire fleets were firing blindly at targets they could not accurately locate. Civilian populations were being attacked by mistake when military forces could not distinguish between enemy vessels and merchant ships. "How many have died?" asked Ambassador Thelmos during the crisis briefing. "Current estimates are over 14 million beings," replied Dr. Nixara, who had become the Council's primary researcher on the expanding catastrophe. That includes combat casualties, industrial accidents, atmospheric failures, and starvation from agricultural collapse. The numbers kept growing. Every day brought reports of new disasters that could have been prevented if human monitoring systems had still been operational. Every week saw the failure of infrastructure that humans had quietly maintained for decades. But the most terrifying aspect of the crisis was that no one knew how to fix it. The human technical documentation was incredibly detailed, but it was written in human scientific language using human mathematical concepts that other species had never bothered to learn. It was like trying to rebuild a complex machine using instructions written in a foreign language. "Have we made any progress in understanding human systems?" Veltar asked Dr. Nixara. "Some, sir, but not enough. We've established emergency teams to study human documentation, but the learning curve is steep. Their approach to engineering and systems management was completely different from our methods." Dr. Nixara displayed holographic charts showing the interconnected nature of human infrastructure. Every system was linked to multiple other systems in ways that other species had never imagined. Environmental monitoring affected agricultural planning. Agricultural planning influenced food distribution. Food distribution impacted economic stability. Economic stability affected diplomatic relationships. Diplomatic relationships influenced military conflicts. The humans didn't just maintain individual systems, Dr. Nixara explained. They maintained the connections between systems. They understood how changes in one area would affect everything else. This was a level of thinking that galactic civilization had never developed. Other species specialized in narrow areas of expertise and focused on maximizing their own benefits. Humans had somehow developed a broader perspective that allowed them to see the galaxy as a single, interconnected system. "Where are they?" demanded War Chief Graktar of the Velkari. "We must find the humans and bring them back." This had become the Council's top priority. Search teams were scouring the galaxy for any trace of human colonies or ships. So far, they had found only abandoned research stations and empty diplomatic facilities. The humans had vanished as completely as if they had never existed. The search teams were making disturbing discoveries. In human facilities throughout the galaxy, they found evidence that humans had been preparing for their departure for years. Critical systems had been gradually transferred to automated control. Essential documentation had been compiled and stored in accessible locations. Warning systems had been established to alert other species about impending problems. "Look at this," reported search team leader Nexhai, displaying a holographic image from an abandoned human research station. They left detailed instructions for maintaining the atmospheric processors on Vega 7. The documentation was sitting right here on the main computer terminal. "Why didn't the Danebian Collective find these instructions?" asked Veltar. "Because they never looked, sir. They assumed the systems would continue working automatically. Similar discoveries were being made throughout the galaxy. Humans had left behind maintenance manuals, troubleshooting guides, and detailed explanations of how critical systems operated. But other species had been so focused on enjoying the benefits of human work that they had never bothered to learn how that work was performed." On the abandoned human colony of New Geneva, search teams found something even more troubling. In the personal quarters of Oh Sung-woo, the former human cultural liaison, they discovered a collection of cultural analysis reports spanning 30 years. Oh Sung-woo had been studying the psychology and social patterns of every species in the galactic community. His reports predicted with startling accuracy how different species would react to various situations. He had identified cultural tensions that would lead to conflicts. He had predicted economic behaviors that would cause market instability. He had analyzed diplomatic patterns that would result in the breakdown of peace agreements. "This human understood us better than we understand ourselves," reported search team leader Vex Kim after reviewing Oh Sung-woo's files. "He predicted every problem we're facing now." The report showed that humans had been quietly managing not just technological systems, but social and political systems as well. They had been preventing conflicts by understanding the cultural triggers that led to war. They had been maintaining economic stability by predicting and preventing market crashes. They had been preserving diplomatic relationships by recognizing and addressing sources of tension before they became critical. The most painful discovery came from the personal files of Jang Mi-kyung, the former human military advisor. Her reports contained detailed predictions about exactly which systems would fail and when. She had identified the critical infrastructure that would need immediate attention after human departure. She had calculated how long various automated systems would continue functioning without human maintenance. "She knew," Commander Krell said quietly after reading Jang Mi-kyung's reports. "She knew exactly what would happen to us." Jang Mi-kyung's final report, filed just days before human departure, contained a precise timeline of the galactic collapse. Her predictions were accurate to within days. System failures, diplomatic crises, economic collapse, military conflicts. Everything was unfolding exactly as she had foreseen. But most troubling of all was the conclusion of her report. Galactic civilization will collapse completely within 18 months of human departure, unless emergency measures are taken immediately. Recommend that other species begin learning essential maintenance skills within 30 days of human withdrawal. The report had been filed with the Council's administrative office. It had been sitting in the archives for a year, unread and ignored. "We need to find them," Veltar declared during another emergency session. Whatever the cost, whatever they demand, we must bring the humans back. The search effort was expanded to include every available ship and sensor array. Deep space exploration teams were sent to investigate distant star systems. Communication broadcasts were transmitted on all frequencies, begging for human contact. Rewards were offered for any information about human locations, but the galaxy was vast and the humans had vanished completely. Some search teams reported detecting faint energy signatures that might indicate human technology, but the signals always disappeared before they could be tracked to their source. It's as if they don't want to be found, reported search coordinator Telvak. After months of fruitless searching, maybe they don't, replied Dr. Nixara. Maybe they've decided that the galaxy isn't worth saving. The possibility was too terrible to consider, but it was becoming increasingly likely. The humans had spent decades trying to teach other species about responsible civilization management. They had filed thousands of reports explaining the importance of their work. They had warned repeatedly about the consequences of ignoring essential maintenance and safety protocols, and other species had dismissed every warning, ignored every explanation, and celebrated when the humans finally gave up and left. Now the galaxy was discovering that some teachers, once rejected, do not return to help students who refuse to learn. Some expertise, once dismissed, cannot be recovered when it becomes desperately needed. As the search continued without success, the collapse accelerated. More worlds faced system failures. 18 months after human departure, the search teams finally found them. It was search coordinator Telvak who made the discovery. His long-range sensors detected an energy signature unlike anything in known galactic space. The reading appeared for only seconds before vanishing, but it was enough to triangulate a general direction. After weeks of careful investigation, Telvak's team traced the signal to its source. The humans were in the Andromeda Galaxy. Impossible, declared Dr. Nixara when she reviewed Telvak's findings. Travel to other galaxies requires technology far beyond anything we possess. The energy requirements alone would be enormous, but the evidence was undeniable. The sensor readings matched human technological signatures perfectly. Somehow the humans had developed interstellar travel capabilities that no other species had imagined possible. Council Speaker Veltar authorized the largest diplomatic mission in galactic history. Every species contributed ships and resources to the expedition. The journey to Andromeda would take months using the fastest vessels available, but the Council was desperate enough to try anything. The diplomatic fleet was led by Ambassador Thelmos, with Dr. Nixara serving as chief scientific advisor. Representatives from every major species were included, along with detailed proposals offering humans anything they might want in exchange for their return. When the fleet finally reached the coordinates where human signals had been detected, they found something incredible. An entire cluster of star systems had been terraformed and populated. Massive space stations orbited inhabited worlds. Agricultural planets produced food in quantities that could support billions of beings. Industrial worlds manufactured technology that seemed centuries ahead of anything in the home galaxy. The humans had built a new civilization from nothing in just 18 months. How is this possible? Ambassador Thelmos asked as his ship approached the largest human space station. Look at the construction methods, Dr. Nixara replied, studying the sensor readings. Everything is integrated. Every system supports every other system. It's the same approach they used in our galaxy, but applied to building an entire civilization instead of maintaining an existing one. The human space station was a marvel of engineering. Energy systems, life support, manufacturing, agriculture, and transportation were all seamlessly connected. Nothing was wasted. Every component served multiple purposes. The efficiency was stunning. A communication signal reached the diplomatic fleet as they approached the station. The voice was calm and professional. This is Seo Yejin of the Terran Federation. We have been expecting you. Ambassador Thelmos felt a mixture of relief and anxiety as he prepared for the most important negotiation in galactic history. Everything depended on convincing the humans to return and help repair the damage their departure had caused. The human space station was even more impressive up close. The docking bay was spacious and well organized. Automated systems guided the diplomatic ships to their assigned berths with perfect precision. Everything worked smoothly. just as human systems had always worked in the old galaxy. Xiao Yejin met the diplomatic delegation in a conference room that overlooked the main colony world through massive viewing windows. She was a middle-aged woman with calm eyes and graying hair. Her manner was polite but distant, like a teacher greeting students who had failed an important test. "Welcome to New Terra," she said as the delegates took their seats. "I assume you're here about the problems in your galaxy." Ambassador Thelmo struggled to find the right words. "How do you apologize for 50 years of ignored warnings and dismissed expertise?" "Yes," he said finally. "Our civilization is collapsing. We need your help." Xiao Yejin nodded as if she had expected this response. "Dr. Nixara's reports have been quite thorough," she said. "We've been monitoring the situation through our long-range sensors." Dr. Nixara was surprised. "You've been watching us?" "Of course. We spent 2 centuries helping to build galactic civilization. We're naturally interested in what happened after we left." Xiao Yejin activated a holographic display showing the current state of the home galaxy. Red warning indicators covered most inhabited systems. The scope of the crisis was even worse than the delegates had realized. 23 worlds have experienced complete infrastructure failure, Xiao Yejin reported with clinical precision. Agricultural output is down 60%. Trade networks have collapsed. Military conflicts are spreading to 14 sectors. Current casualty estimates exceed 30 million beings. The numbers were devastating, but Xiao Yejin's tone remained neutral, as if she were discussing weather patterns rather than galactic catastrophe. "We can offer you anything," Ambassador Thelmo said desperately. "Territory, resources, political control. Name your price for returning and helping us fix these problems." Xiao Yejin was quiet for a long moment, studying the faces of the desperate delegates. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "There is no price," she said. "We're not coming back." The silence that followed was crushing. Dr. Nixara was the first to speak. "But millions of beings are dying. Entire worlds are becoming uninhabitable. Without your expertise, our civilization will completely collapse." "Yes," Xiao Yejin agreed. "That's exactly what we predicted would happen. We filed detailed reports explaining the consequences of removing human oversight from critical systems. Those reports were ignored." She activated another display showing archived documents, thousands of reports filed by human specialists over 50 years. Every warning that had been dismissed, every recommendation that had been rejected, every offer to teach essential skills that had been declined. Li Wujin filed 47 reports about environmental risks in mining operations. All ignored. Park So-young submitted detailed analyses of economic instabilities that would develop without trade mediation. All dismissed. Kim Taewon provided comprehensive documentation about infrastructure maintenance requirements. No one was interested. The evidence was overwhelming. For decades, humans had tried to share their knowledge and teach other species how to maintain the systems they had built. The response had been consistent. Other species wanted the benefits of human expertise without the effort of learning how that expertise was applied. "We tried for 50 years to prepare you for independence from human support," Xiao Yejin continued. "We offered training programs, educational exchanges, and detailed documentation. The response was always the same. Just keep the systems running. We don't need to understand how they work." Lim Dong-hyun, the administrator of the New Terra colony, entered the conference room carrying a large data storage device. "This contains everything you need to repair your galaxy," he said, placing the device on the table. "Complete technical documentation for every system we maintained, step-by-step repair procedures, educational materials to train your own specialists, troubleshooting guides for every problem you're likely to encounter." Dr. Nixara stared at the device. "You're giving us the solutions?" "We're giving you the same information we tried to give you for 50 years, Lim Dong-hyun replied. "The difference is that now you might actually be motivated to learn it." Moon Jae-ho, the Human Defense Coordinator, joined the discussion. "Your species celebrated when we left because you thought we were interfering with your activities. You didn't understand that we were trying to prevent exactly the disasters you're experiencing now. But surely you feel some responsibility for the deaths that are occurring," Ambassador Thelmos protested. "You could save lives by returning to help." Xiao Yejin's expression remained calm. "We feel responsible for the 2 centuries we spent keeping your civilization stable, while other species refuse to learn essential skills. We do not feel responsible for the consequences of choices your species made after we left. She gestured toward the viewing window, where the human colony world was visible in the distance. Cities sparkled on the planet's surface, connected by transportation networks that moved with perfect efficiency. We have built a civilization based on cooperation, education, and shared responsibility, she said. Every human learns how our systems work. Everyone contributes to maintenance and improvement. When problems develop, we solve them together instead of expecting someone else to fix them. The contrast was obvious. Human civilization functioned smoothly because humans had learned from their experiences in the old galaxy. They had applied those lessons to create something better. Can't you at least send advisors? Dr. Nixara asked. Technical specialists who could help us understand your documentation? We tried that for 2 centuries, Moon Jae-ho replied. Our advisors were treated as servants rather than teachers. Our recommendations were ignored until crises forced compliance. Our efforts to share knowledge were dismissed as unnecessary interference. Seo Ye-jin stood up, indicating that the meeting was ending. We learned an important lesson from our time in your galaxy, she said. You cannot help people who do not want to be helped. You cannot teach people who refuse to learn. And you cannot maintain a civilization for people who refuse to take responsibility for that civilization themselves. She handed Ambassador Thelmos the data storage device containing the technical solutions. Everything you need is in there, she said. The question is whether you're finally ready to do the work of learning it.